On the 10th of May 1945, a senior commander in the Waffen-SS was facing his execution. He had been arrested along with a number of other men, and he was brought out to be executed by a firing squad. This was not just a normal execution of a soldier on the battlefield. The man who was being shot was one of 4 Estonian men to receive the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross of Nazi Germany, a very significant award, and he'd previously served inside the Red Army before he was turned over to the Nazi German side. Paul Meitler was also known as Kugelblitz, or Ball Lightning, for his actions on the battlefield. But why was he executed in the days after the end of the Second World War? Welcome to the Untold Past. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Paul Meitler was born as Paul Mathisen on the 27th of March 1913. He was born inside the Governorate of Livonia within the Russian Empire. He had a rather normal upbringing, but in September 1934 he trained in the Estonian military school, and 3 years later he went into officer training. Meitler then became part of the 3rd Infantry Battalion, and he rose to the rank of lieutenant before the Second World War broke out. However, during the Soviet occupation of Estonia, Meitler was then drafted into the Red Army. He served inside of this until July 1941, when he was on the battlefield captured by the Germans and the Wehrmacht. This may have been during the launching of Operation Barbarossa, as his units may have encountered problems against the might of the German army. The attacks of Barbarossa also took the Soviets and the Red Army by surprise, but Meitler then found himself imprisoned by the Germans until November 1941. But instead of being sent towards a concentration or prisoner of war camp, like many Soviet commissars and soldiers were, which often resulted in their execution, Paul Meitler was actually given a role inside of the Wehrmacht, and he joined the 37th Police Battalion, and for the Nazis he was guarding German airfields. He then joined the year later the Estonian Legion, a part of the Waffen-SS made up of Estonian soldiers. He trained for this inside of Poland and received further officer training, but the Estonian Waffen-SS Brigade then got involved in a number of battles fighting against the Soviet Union, the very people whom Meitler was previously fighting for. He was decorated with the Iron Cross Second Class for bravery and was promoted to the rank of Hauptsturmführer. But Meitler was then given command of the 1st Battalion of the 45th Regiment of the 20th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS. He was then later awarded the Knight's Cross for his bravery. It was said of this that, after 3 days of fire, the enemy commenced their attack against a friendly position in the Narva Gap on the 28th of July 1944. Having smashed up the front line with the fury of their artillery, they succeeded in capturing a decisive hill that was vital for the continuation of the defence. A few hours later, Meitler and his battalion were brought up. They were sent into a counterattack against a far materially superior enemy, with the mission of taking back this important hill. In an energetic attack that saw no restraint, the battalion stormed this important hill under the exemplary leadership of its commander, and it continued to pursue the fleeing enemy beyond it. As a result of this success by the battalion and its brave commander, it has been possible for the Tannenberg Line to be held up to the present day, with a breakthrough of the enemy being prevented. The award of the Knight's Cross to the Iron Cross for Hauptsturmführer Meitler is as especially justified. Even though he does not carry the Iron Cross First Class, the result he achieved is too outstanding to be ignored, and for the immense bravery he showed during the battle, he should be awarded the Iron Cross First Class. His divisional commander also added his own words, saying, "The award of the Knight's Cross, along with the Iron Cross First Class, is approved by me. The personal courage of SS Hauptsturmführer Meitler during this counterattack at Orphanage Hill, south of Narva, Reval Road, was vital for the holding of the Tannenberg Line. Furthermore, his independent decision to pursue the fleeing enemy gave Kampfgruppe Krugel, which had been heavily weakened by the enemy attack, time to reorganise itself for defence." Regarding his mentality and how much of a Nazi he was, he wrote in his diary at one point that, "Every little kid learns history at school, studying the history of our nation, but later forgets how the entire history of Estonians consists only for a struggle for our existence, the struggle against our strong and big neighbours. No other nation's history is like this. No one has fought over so many generations and suffered so much as we Estonians." When Peru of Vergamay says in A.H. Tomsar's Truth and Justice, that there is much heroic kind of people at Wagner. It's actually said about all Estonians, a heroic kind of people on the shore of the Baltic Sea. We shall fight until we have our lost liberty back, and we shall defend it to the last man. These are the Estonians. As the war turned against the Germans, Meitler found himself inside of the 45th Regiment after a brief period recovering from illness, and he found himself in Central Europe. His final promotion was to the rank of Sturmbannführer, but for years the fate of Paul Meitler was lost. But he suffered a brutal and ruthless execution that took place on the 10th of May 1945, a day before he had been arrested and seized by a group of Czech communists. He hid his award, the Knight's Cross, as he knew it probably meant certain death to him, and he was travelling inside of a car. Specifically, the car he was travelling in was Meitler's, and German soldiers at the time were retreating over the Czech mountains to get to the Elbe River, and many were beginning to surrender to American troops. They were heading towards Prague when they were stopped by the Czechs, 5 kilometres north of Nymburk, and the men in the car were then taken under armed escort to Nymburk. They were forced to stand against a wall, but one man noticed the colours of Estonia on the sleeves of the uniforms. He was thrown inside of a basement and was then paraded throughout the streets along with the other men. The locals threw rocks and spat at Meitler and these men, and the guards were tolerant to allow the locals to attack them. Women even spat in the men's faces, and they were then taken into the main square of the town and attacked again. A war court hastily gathered, sentenced the captured men, including Paul Meitler, to death, and it was said that 7 SS men made their way to the outskirts of the town of Nymburk, near to where an anti-tank trench was. There were 5 people photographed, shown who were executed there, meaning 2 may have been killed by the crowds, or they could have been spared or imprisoned. One of the men who was executed was certainly Paul Meitler. He was forced to stand on the edge of the anti-tank ditch, which was rather deep, and he was stood opposite his firing squad. Meitler held his hands up in the air to surrender, and to try and probably plead for his life, but this was in vain. The men had been allowed one last cigarette, but the shouts of fire from the Czech executioners were heard, and they fired straight into Paul Meitler, and he was instantly killed and executed, and his body fell into the anti-tank ditch. What is strange about the execution of Paul Meitler is that his story was lost for some time, and was only uncovered in the 21st century, roughly 60 years after his execution, as photographs were discovered in an archive. His body, along with the remains of 4 others, have never been found, and presumably near to the settlement of Nymburk, buried under a thin layer of mud and dirt, the body of Paul Meitler lays, presumably with his Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, in his pocket or jacket, or lying next to his skeletal remains, as his uniform could have decayed. For many he was a traitor who, following his arrest, defected over to the Nazi cause, but it was either this or face a concentration camp, or even worse, execution inside an extermination centre, with absolutely no chance of survival. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.